Welcome in the latest episode of That SEC Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by my cousin Shane, who goes by Big Orange Vols on Twitter. What's up, yo, Tennessee Auburn?
We probably wonder why I ain't opening up a beer because I'm already 3 deep. We did our interview, so I probably need to slow down a little bit. But I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Oh, doing great. Just got off the line with our buddy Brett Ciancia, Pick 6 Previews. Head on over to pick6previews.com. There's a link in the show notes. You got to be getting the college football preview magazine from Brett. Outstanding stuff. We're going to cover every SEC team. But before we get to that, Shay, just 2 things I wanted to talk with you about here just briefly. But, man, really, really unfortunate news. Alex Collins, legendary Arkansas running back, and, you know, he was instrumental in one of my favorite plays of all time, the 4th and 25 Henry Heave. Alex Collins has passed away, Shane, in a motorcycle accident. It's been a rough one, man, for Razorback Nation. You know, Ryan Mallett just recently passed. Peyton Hillis, thank God, he's nearly died, but saving his children. I can't imagine what that fan base is going through right now.
Yeah, no, you hate to hear it, especially such a young. I mean, it's like your kid. You know what I'm saying? And I can't imagine what these parents are going through and Razorback community. I hear he's a great. You can always tell, man, when somebody is not just an athlete but loved by their university. When you start hearing these remarks that are coming out, and he will be missed. Truly, truly sad news.
Right, and just 2 things I saw that were great, Shane. I mean, he's a Florida native.
Yeah.
And when he went to Arkansas, Florida State, and Miami, they were all good. He chose Arkansas. And to this day, if you go to his Twitter account, his pinned tweet is an article of, I believe it was either when he committed or when he declared for the draft and just said thank you to Arkansas fans. To this, and that's 10 years ago, remains his pinned tweet, just to give you an idea of just how much love he had for the Arkansas Razorbacks. So truly a sad day for that whole community and the entire football community.
Absolutely, man. I mean, we love football, and sometimes, you get wrapped up into, this, you only got so many laps around the sun. So,
yep. All right, Shane, we'll get to our interview with Brett in just a second, but I had to ask you, because I know I tuned in, Shane, the best Texas A&M content out there, TexAgs. I've been on the show a couple times. We love Billy Lucci, David Munoz. I mean, they got some of the best people, Ollie Buchanan, on and on and on. But the Tennessee Homer made his TexAgs debut here on Tuesday. Go check it out. I just want to get the behind the scenes, Shane, of what it was like doing your first big interview like that. How nervous were you, and how'd it go?
Well, for 10 minutes, we talked about that they don't hate you, Mike. Apparently last year was a one-off, but no, it was great, man. They really got their shit together down there, and not saying that we don't, but I'm just saying it was cool getting on there talking some college football. We we covered all the teams pretty much, not just Texas Ag, but yeah, it was great catching up with the boys.
Yeah, well, I loved it. Well, buddy,
I was nervous. I ain't gonna lie, Mike. You know that because I don't do interviews, and this is, I think, maybe the first one, Mike. It may be like the first one I've done, other than like media day stuff.
Right.
Getting onto a show. So me and Mike, we got on. We tested this Zoom thing. I didn't want to look like an idiot when I got on there, but it worked great. I still probably look like an idiot, but I had a blast with them anyway.
Yeah, it was a great interview for anybody that missed it. Go check it out over at the TexAgs feed. But I wanted to share that. But hey, buddy, let's kick it over to our outstanding interview with Brett Ciancia, Pick 6 Previews. We're once again pleased to be joined by Brett Ciancia, Pick 6 Previews, the go-to college football preview magazine. It gets better every year, and now that you can even get it in a hard copy edition, because I don't know about you, Brett, and obviously it's the case, but just having something physical in your hands, Yeah, I know college football season is finally here when I got my Pick Six previews, and thanks to you, I got it in hand once again. So thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mike and Shane, for having me. It's one of my favorite stops in my preseason podcast and radio tour. It's been great to grow along with you guys. I remember when that SEC podcast was just starting out. Now I see you guys at Media Day. I see you on TV. It's really taken off. But you guys are my go-to source for the SEC. So keep up the good work. And yeah, I appreciate the praise. I agree with you on the hard copy. It's an old-fashioned product. It's been around, the college football preseason magazine in general. They've been around for decades, all the way back to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. It's just a staple. So while most organizations are going away from hard copy, I dove into it. I went away from digital, and now it's hard copy also. So it's something special to it. Bring it to the lake, bring it to the beach. Have it on the coffee table on Saturdays in the fall to scout out your next opponent. So I agree with you there. A little old-fashioned, but there's definitely a place for it.
Well, we're old, so it really comes in handy when you can hold it. It's like I get the digital thing that went wild there for a minute. I even went to a restaurant the other day, and you had to scan a QR code to make it. I was like, golly, can't you just hand me a menu? So I do appreciate the actual book, and especially for us old farts out there.
Before we dive into it, Brett, can you tell us kind of some of the aspects of the magazine that is new this year? Because I noticed a few changes and improvements. I mean, you pack so much information into this book, and I know that you speak with head coaches. You spend so much time making your college football preview, the Pick Six previews. Can you go into what's new and just, for anybody that is not familiar with your work, just how much time goes into making your fine college football preview magazine?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Pick Six Previews I launched in 2012. It's really a one-man show. It's just me. I think that's a differentiator with some of the other magazines. I have a lot of respect for them. They have hundreds of writers. They have staff. They have everything. It's a one-man show here. So I'm digging into all 69 Power 5 teams in the book. I have my advanced stats, my game grader. So I have the numbers aspect of it, but putting it back into readable terms. You don't want to just read about acronyms or decimal points and all this. So put it back into readable terms. I'm talking to head coaches, talking to coordinators, learning about the schemes they're trying to run, their recruiting strategies, everything you could think of. So that's the gist of the book. But yeah, for new features this year, I added a bunch. Well, the way this game's changing with all the transfers, I thought it was necessary to put in an all-transfer team for each conference and nationally because, the all-SEC team, you're familiar with that, but to really get a snapshot of who's coming, who's leaving into these conferences. So the all-transfer team was new. I added in, so I went a little bit deeper. So I used to have my opponent-adjusted offense numbers and opponent-adjusted defense numbers. And I dug a little bit deeper. I added the rushing and the passing on top of all that. So in addition to the usual, 30 to 40 different metrics I look at, I added that into the page too. And that might sound boring, it might sound like a word salad, but trust me, it's visually appealing. You got your green, your red, your yellow to see if it was good or bad. And I put it back into readable terms. So that's, and then at the very back of the book, I did add a little bit on the non-AQ teams. As I said, it's a one-man show. So for the level of detail that I want to go into, I had to cap it at the Power 5. I have a lot of respect for these non-AQ teams, but not enough manpower to dig into them as deep as I'd like. With that said, I added some stat graphics. So the same stats you get on the Power 5 teams, you can now get a quick glance at Boise State or Air Force and all those. So those are the new features. But, there's a lot to break down. It's been a crazy offseason, obviously.
Yeah, I like the colors. I felt like that was a little personal, but I do want to let you know that I appreciate it. It was an easier read when you got something to look at,
All right, Brett, so let's get into your official preseason projections for the SEC. And let's go with the West first because everybody kind of respects that as the tougher side. Although the East, they won the West battle, so we got to give them their props. And, of course, that's where home of the two-time defending national champion. So we'll get to the East. But out of the West, you're on that same thing that Shane's on there. Alabama, number one. What is it about the Crimson Tide that you like to win the West? And I don't know if you've seen it, but I got them number 3 because I call it the decaying dynasty.
Whoa, wow. That's bold claim, but there might be some truth to the decay. I mean, look at Georgia somewhat surpassing them as the dynasty in college football right now, back-to-back champs. But yeah, I still have Alabama winning the West. A couple reasons. I mean, right away, their recruiting is number one over the last 5 year, 3 year, whatever span you want to look at. They're number one, and I know that doesn't always translate perfectly, but Alabama's done a great job with player identification and player development and getting them to play their potential. So I love the roster. We could talk specific players. I like their offensive line. I like their defense, especially their linebackers. But really what stands out is just such a track record over Nick Saban's tenure. I put in these things on the SEC page, the 3 year, 5 year, and 10 year stat trends. Alabama's number one in almost every single category over all those spans. So it's just a numbers play there. I think they're going to bounce back, win the division. They were so close last year. They lost twice by a point. So I think they're going to take home the West Crown this year. Although I'll say they have more question marks than a usual Saban team, but I still got them winning the West.
You have LSU number 2. How close is that gap between Alabama and LSU in 2023 after the Tigers won the division last fall?
I'd say it's razor thin. They're right there. In fact, when you look at my overall rankings, I have Alabama 5th. I've got LSU 6th. So 5 and 6. It's really a dead heat for that title. I have them pretty close. With LSU, love their quarterback, Jaden Daniels. He showed off his dual threat ability. Really took care of the ball last year. And then what else? Their offensive line was a bit young, but is now improving. I think it reverts to a strength this year. Such a deep running back room. I don't know who will emerge, but they got 8 candidates there. At receiver, they bring back some stars. And really the defense, and through the transfer portal, really was reshaped. They brought in Omar Spates, a 4 year starter from Oregon State at middle backer. The defensive secondary is loaded with transfers. So there's a lot to like. I think that they definitely remain in the top 10. And with a big opener against Florida State, they could surge even higher. So we'll see.
Well, can I ask about the power rankings there, because you kind of mentioned it there. You've got Georgia, LSU, and Alabama. Those are in the top 12. Texas, if you're including them in the SEC. But does that alarm you at all that there's not more SEC programs that you would consider a top 12?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Georgia and Alabama, I still consider our dynasty tier. I mean, they're top 5 annually. LSU's right there at 6. A little bit of a gap, but the thing is, most of these teams are ranked. I mean, I have A&M down at 19th, Tennessee there at 14th, and Ole Miss in the top 25. I actually have Mississippi State ranked. I don't think any other publication has that. So if you extend that out to the top 25, I think it's packed with SEC teams, not to mention 2 more coming in with Oklahoma and Texas. So, it might look thin in the top 10, but they're definitely the highest rated and the most respect I have for a conference out there this year.
So safe to say that I realize you're not projecting LSU to make a run to the college football playoff, but right outside that at number 6. So would that stun you at all if they did make a run and advance to the college football playoff in year 2 under Brian Kelly?
Well, it's interesting because for the SEC West to make the playoff, they're going to have to beat Georgia and Atlanta. I don't think we've seen yet in college football where a team loses the conference title game and still makes it the next day into the bracket. And as I'm saying that, I'm actually just remembering Max Duggan TCU last year. But before last year, we hadn't seen it. It's very rare. You would have to come into that game undefeated, and I don't see LSU entering Atlanta undefeated. But so if they can knock out Georgia, it's going to have to go that route. I don't think the SEC gets 2 in this year, just because their best teams are in separate divisions. It's going to be tough.
I want to ask on that note, Mike, is there any team that you're looking at? Because you know these depth charts better than anybody. And I'm looking at some of them saying, well, if they play their cards right, they got a shot to get to Atlanta. Is there any SEC teams you're looking at saying, hey, this would not surprise me if at the end of the year we're talking about them being potentially a college football playoff team?
Yeah, well, I'll throw 2 in there. Texas A&M. I know it's that time of year where they start to be a little bit overrated and people jump on it, but I think there's some truth to it. I'll break down A&M real quick. So last year, it was overhyped. It was the number 1 recruiting class. They were all 18-year-old true freshmen. It just didn't click. When you dig deeper, they were really close. They had 5 one-score losses. And that was with a terrible injury run against their offensive line. I think 3 starters were knocked out. They were shuffling guys all year. That really crippled the offense. So fast forward a year, that whole class is now second years. They found their quarterback in Connor Weigman. Well, unlike last year, they were scrambling into October, November, trying to find their guy. They got him. And their offensive line is now back and healthy. They return everybody. So I think that, I'm not calling for a playoff run or anything, but this A&M team is going to really improve their win total from last year. And then a team from the East, and I know Cousin Shane's going to be excited for this one, but I've got Tennessee number 2 in the East. And really, I mean, I know it's a huge if, but if they get past Georgia, that flips the whole dynamic. And, I know they lose Hendon Hooker, a guy I believe should have been in New York City last year. He was on my ballot as a Heisman voter, should have been there. But that rant aside, there's a lot to like from Tennessee. Great receiver core. I think that Milton's got a cannon for an arm. This offense is proven, the whole scheme by Heupel. And the defense was underappreciated last year nationally. Number 5 in my rushing defense when you adjust for opponent and adjust for pace. So really strong there. A lot of guys back. So I'll say Tennessee and A&M are that next tier out, that a couple breaks their way, a couple stars come out of nowhere. They could make it to Atlanta and beyond.
You knew eventually I was going to get there, Mike. I didn't know if it'd be later in the interview or not, but I knew thered be a scenario where I could convince him that Tennessee has a potential to win a national championship.
I was looking for the question from the Tennessee homer himself.
All right, I'm done with that.
We can talk
thank
Tennessee
you.
the whole rest of the show. Shane won't be mad, but we got to finish the West here. Ole Miss, you already hit on Texas A&M. You got them 3 in the West. That's certainly, Shane and I are right there with you. Ole Miss number 4. These next 4, I think you could almost put in any order. Personally, I'm curious to know what you think. What separates Ole Miss from the others in the West? At least I don't want to say the bottom, because I don't think there is a bottom in the West. It's so difficult. But what makes you put confidence in Ole Miss at number 4?
Yeah, with Ole Miss, a few areas stand out. First, their offensive line. They returned 4 guys from last year's unit. They placed in the top 20 of both my pass protection and my offensive line run push metrics. Only 1 of 5 in the country, and that's with Georgia, Ohio State, some of the best offensive lines in the country. 4 guys back. They bring Judkins back, who was close to breaking Herschel Walker's record for a freshman running back. They led the conference in rushing. They dropped like 400 yards a couple times against SEC opponents last year. Really impressive. So for all the, I think a lot of fans just think of Lane Kiffin as an air raid guy and just throwing the ball 60 times a game. That's misinformed. I mean, if the numbers in the box are there, he's going to take what's there and run the ball. And they were really strong at it last year. So I think they're going to have a great rushing attack last year. Like last year, a great quarterback problem to have when you have all these talented quarterbacks battling it out. I've never seen such a competition there. So, they're going to be strong there, whoever emerges. And the defense is still a question. That's why I have them down at 4th in the West. But overall, still strong enough to finish 21st overall. Right there, I do have Mississippi State close. And this is a team, we'll get to them next, that I think is very underrated nationally.
Hey, let me ask on the Ole Miss, the SEC units there. You mentioned the quarterback room. You've got them at 9th. Is that because you think that there is a quarterback competition there, or is that because maybe one hasn't emerged as the candidate? Like if we heard Jackson Dart was the guy from day one, do you think this is a ranking you would have a little higher?
That's a great point. A little bit of it is uncertainty. Like you'll see that I have Alabama down at 10th just because I don't know what's going to emerge there or if they have a surefire starter, all SEC caliber guy. But when you look at the other teams in the conference, this conference is loaded at quarterback. KJ Jefferson I have as my first teamer. I've got Jaden Daniels second. Even some key transfers coming in like Devin Leary, who put up 30 touchdowns at NC State 2 years ago. Milton, we talked about. And Rattler, he's proven himself. Mm-hmm. So it's just a loaded conference. Some of the unit rankings, the margins are so thin that a team I have 9th could be right there 4th or 5th. It's really tough to do. I'd encourage everybody to try and rank these units. It's tough, but I like what he's done. The Portal King, as they call him, Lane Kiffin.
Absolutely. I'd encourage you not to, okay?
Shane, for you, it's Tennessee.
I've never seen so much hate mail in my
Tennessee
life.
first. No, it's a loaded conference, guys. And look, ninth in the SEC might still be top 20 nationally in a lot of these categories.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned your respect for Mississippi State, Brett. Brett, I think though those Hail State fans have got to be loving you right now because you're right. Virtually no one is giving them any kind of respect at all. What gives you confidence to put Mississippi State number 5 in the West, considering first-year head coach and all the changes this offseason in Starkville?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I think that when you look at the other magazines and publications there, everyone's picked for last in the division. I don't see it. I have them in the top 25 there. I'll start on defense because that's really what's been strong and what will continue to be strong under Zach Garnett. I think that they found one of the best coordinators in the game defensively, and given the tragedy, unfortunately, what happened, they took that opportunity to promote him as head coach. So they lock in one of the best defensive minds in the game. His 3-3-5 scheme's an outlier that teams just aren't ready to prepare for. And, he's proven it. It's been a top 15 ranking the past 3 years on defense. So strong defense there. They got some key decisions from some veterans to return instead of go to the pros early on that side of the ball. And then offensively, it's going to be a scheme change. Anything outside of Mike Leach's air raid offense, he was the last purist, really the true air raid. Everything from there will be more run and balanced. And but I think they got a good one from App State and Coach Barbay coming in, really balanced attack. You're going to see more explosive plays from Mississippi State, where in the past there might have been a lot of short passes and hope to break a tackle and go. These are going to be downfield shots. So I think that might excite some Bulldogs fans. And it's a really veteran team. I mean, Coach Leach aside, this was kind of poised to be their breakthrough year, 2023, when you look at the roster breakdown. So even with all that, I have them 5th, 24th overall.
Now, I'm just preparing you. Arkansas fans are going to be all up in your mentions tomorrow because you got Arkansas number 6. Now, is that, I'll let you speak, but is that because the West is so difficult, or is it because you hate them Arkansas Razorbacks?
No, I love Arkansas. I went down there to Fayetteville. I think it was 2018 or 2017. I picked a bad time to go. It was when Auburn blew them out. It was before Sam Pittman got there. It was a rough showing, but still, even with a blowout loss, I appreciated Dixon Street, saw some passionate fans, and I vowed that I'd return once this thing got fixed, and I think I'm due because Arkansas is a proven program. I've got them 29th overall in the country, so 6th in the West, still top 30 nationally. And if it's any consolation prize, I've got KJ Jefferson, first team All-SEC quarterback, and I got Rocket Sanders, first team SEC running back. So the best backfield, the most proven at this point in the SEC. Some question marks arise at receiver. A lot of transfers and guys gone there. Offensive line, a little bit of a question mark, even though that's one of Sam Pittman's strong points. Well, it is a strong point. But then a couple coordinator changes too. It's a little bit of an uncertainty. Lastly, the defense. We gotta improve the defense a little bit here. Towards the bottom of the barrel on pretty much any defensive stat last year. And I don't see enough overnight fixes through the portal. They did well, but in this SEC West, it just wasn't enough to keep pace. So I got them at 6.
And so Auburn comes in at 7, and is that a product of, they really hit the portal too, and obviously new coach, but new coordinators, both sides of the ball. But how hard is it to get a read on what Auburn will be this fall?
Yeah, well, I wrote this in the book. It just feels weird placing anybody last, quote unquote, in the SEC West, because Auburn would be able to contend in a lot of different divisions. But I got them last place. I watched their spring game. There was a lot to work on still, I think, in the transition season. Quarterback was wide open. Now, they did get some late additions through the portal after spring. There's some questions here. The defense loses a lot. Both lines have question marks, which is so crucial in the SEC, as you guys know. I like the transfer class. It finished top 5 in the country, but I just think it's an overall transition year, and we're not going to really see Hugh Freeze's program until the next year. So I'm looking at them for a breakout in 2024.
Don't forget, the podcast is brought to you by Game Time Sidekicks. Head on over to GameTimeSidekicks.com and put in that promo code SEC for 20% off your entire order. You do that at the checkout, Shane. This is NCAA officially licensed memorabilia here. Stainless steel cups, sippy cups, dog bowls. Shane's got his right there. This is truly outstanding product, and you really help out the podcast. And the best part, Shane, you're going to love the cup you get from Game Time Sidekicks. It really, really helps the podcast if you want to take advantage of this. And we would not be pitching Game Time Sidekicks if we didn't believe in them ourselves. So help small business. They're a small business. We're a small business. Help us all out here. GameTimeSidekicks.com. Head on over. Promo code SEC for 20% off your entire order. And we're also brought to you by Manscaped, Shane. 20% off and free shipping courtesy of Manscaped. So head on over, manscaped.com. Same promo code. They made it easy for you. SEC will get you 20% off and free shipping over at manscaped.com. In the show notes, there's links to both of these. And they, Shane, are selling this outstanding Beard Hedger Pro, and that kit comes with shampoo, conditioner. I didn't even know you could get beard conditioner, but they got it, buddy. Oil, pump, and a travel case, all included in the Beard Hedger Pro. Head on over to manscaped.com, and don't forget that promo code SEC for 20% off and free shipping. So you got Tennessee, number 1 in the East. I'm just kidding. Calm down, dogs. Calm down. Georgia, the pick in the East, just like everybody. Everybody's got the Bulldogs, but I don't even know how to ask this, Brett, because everybody's just got them number 1 and likely SEC champs, likely, headed to the playoff. But is there any weakness is probably not even the right word, because there are no weaknesses really, but any slight concerns you have about the Dogs? And again, when I'm saying this is not even to win the East, to win the SEC, but clearly the goal now in Athens is to win the national championship. Any question marks that you need to see answered before you're convinced that the Dogs do it again?
Well, yeah, a couple of things. I think normally when you look at a playoff team or a national champion, those teams are rated by the pros. They lose a lot of guys going early to the pros. So you look at returning starters, returning production as your potential flaw. But when you talk Georgia, they rotate their defenders more than anybody. So the snap counts, when you look at those, they're pretty spread thin. So when you lose quote-unquote starters and you have, quote, new starters, these guys are pretty well-versed, and they're practicing against the best offense in the country and vice versa. So I don't really have a concern personnel-wise. They have 5 stars everywhere. Basically, the way I put it is it's just next year's NFL draft picks. You haven't heard of them yet, but they're next year's pick coming up the ranks. So my question mark for Georgia would be at offensive coordinator because Todd Monken, he got a lot of credit early on, and he deserves all of it for modernizing that offense the last 3 years, really elevating that. And on a per play and an explosiveness metric, they were tops in the country. So very impressive play calling and play design and scheme-wise by Monken. So you lose him to the pros. He goes to the Baltimore Ravens. So some questions there. Now, I know that Mike Bobo is very, very well-versed in the SEC. He actually put together some great offenses at Georgia about a decade ago, some really statistical giants there. But still, I think the transition there at play caller and at offensive coordinator, if you need a question mark for Georgia, I think it'd be there.
Let me ask about Georgia, because you've looked at their schedule and everybody's made fun of them Georgia Bulldogs and how easy the run is. If I remove the Tennessee Volunteers, because obviously that's going to be their biggest obstacle, is there another team that that's where we're at. Can Georgia lose a game this year during the regular season? Is there one game maybe you're looking at like, as the stars line up, we may have us a ball game here?
Well, I don't see anything. And the thing is, a lot of those games you consider to be potential trap teams, they're all at home this year. I have Kentucky third in the East, and I have Missouri high, Ole Miss we talked about, but all 3 of them are right there in Georgia between the hedges. So the road trip at Auburn, we had them last in the West. Road trip to Vandy, it's going to be all red in there anyway. And then Georgia Tech going through a coaching transition. So, and then with Florida, too, being a neutral site, I have them pretty low this year, relatively for Florida standards. Yeah, I just don't see any threats. So I mean, if anything, maybe
crown them. Just crown
yeah,
them.
maybe one position or one unit will step up like they did last year, like Missouri's defense or Ole Miss's offense. Maybe one side of the ball can rise up and get them, but complete team wise, I think Georgia is going to coast to that Tennessee game 10-0.
Well, you've already kind of previewed Tennessee, Brett, but let me ask you, which game do you think is more believable that the Vols win next fall? On the road at Alabama, the decaying dynasty, or at home against Georgia, two-time national champion here? Which one do you think is the most realistic to happen, even though you're probably not going on that limb to you're not predicting it, you're just saying which one, I guess, would shock you less?
Yeah, well, I got to say, I was blown away by Tennessee's home field advantage last year in that Alabama game. I think it was the game of the season, not just for Vols fans or SEC people, but that was the most college football. It was quintessential college football, that game. It was incredible, the game itself. Then the celebration was so pure. It reminded me of the old days where the goalposts get ripped down and thrown in the lake. So, I mean, that was just an incredible college football moment. And, it's been lacking recently. It's been a lot of chalk recently, and it's all been about the playoff structure or the conference realignment. So to see that game, just pure college football, was special. So all that to say, I'm going to throw out the home field card here. I'm going to pick the Alabama road trip. I think that Alabama's got a lot more question marks than Georgia, and you're still catching Bama mid-season compared to Georgia will be a well-oiled machine there in late November. So I think out of the two, I think that the Alabama game is more likely.
And you wonder why this is the only book I read every year, Mike. Because a man knows football.
All right, so you got Kentucky, number 3. We love Kentucky, too. Why do you project a bounce-back season in Lexington this season?
Well, a couple reasons. Number one, an offensive coordinator. They get Liam Cohen back. And for those unfamiliar, he was great for them in 2021. And then went to the pros for a year, and everything fell apart. I don't know if it's a 1-to-1 ratio there, or he's the only reason, but there's definitely a trend there. So he's back. I think he's going to help fix the offensive line, which had an uncharacteristically poor season last year. I mean, for the years I've been doing Pick Six previews, especially the last 5 or 6, they've been known for that big blue wall, that offensive line. And that went away last year, and you saw them become very one-dimensional, really struggled. So I think they fixed the offensive line. They fixed the offensive coordinator spot. They made a great addition with Devin Leary through the portal. He was my all-transfer SEC quarterback. They replaced Chris Rodriguez's departure there, too. And then what you're getting with the defense, too. It's always above average. Coach White does a nice job over there. So I think it's just a very solid team, and, enough to place third in the East. Another thing I like, too, they got a top 15 recruiting haul and a top 15 transfer haul, which if you follow recruiting, Kentucky doesn't usually do that. So they're doing a great job there in player acquisition, and I think you're going to see it in the win column this year.
Now, you got Florida a lot higher, too, than a lot of people, but you also got Missouri, both of them tied for 4th. How can you have a tie here, Brett? Explain yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that South Carolina is usually the pick here for 3rd or 4th. I have Carolina down at 6th. I really like more what Missouri and Florida have coming back for 2023. The tie is because, I couldn't decide between 4th or 5th here. I have them both ahead of Carolina, though. That was really the genesis of it. So, but first with Missouri, this is really a play on their defense. I really like Coach Baker. I had a chance to talk with him a couple off seasons ago. His defense is very aggressive, and I know a lot of coaches say that, but you look at his stat profile every year, whether it's Missouri, when he was at Miami, they're top 10 in negative play rate. They're causing havoc behind the line of scrimmage, sacks, tackles for loss, picks. And the key is top 10 in returning production on defense. That whole thing is back from last year, one of the best in the country. You saw what they did to Georgia. I know they didn't win the game, but they definitely held them in check for 3+ quarters. So Missouri, it's really a play on their defense, and I think some 5 stars on offense. You're starting to see that great recruiting by Drinkwitz come to fruition. And I think they'll have a healthier quarterback. It came out that the QB had I think that he was a little bit banged up. He lost some zip on the ball. So I think overall they're poised for a breakthrough season. Everyone's got him 6th. I've got him 4th.
How about them Gators, though? I mean, you're a lot higher on them than most.
Yeah, I don't know if it is higher than most. I guess. I mean, I think a lot might have them sixth or fifth. I've got them there tied fourth. I don't see them contending for anything of importance this year. I don't think they're going to contend for the East or challenge Georgia or anything. But I think they get back to a bowl. I mean, that should be the requirement here in a second year under Billy Napier. Almost the storyline within the story is how they're recruiting, because I think that for Florida to really reach its potential as a program, reach its ceiling as a program, they've got to be a top 5 national recruiter year in and year out, just given their geography, who they're going up against in the conference, in the division. So the storyline really is actually off field for me. I want to see if they can really sign this top 5 class. They're trending well, but they're going to need a bowl season to keep that momentum going. If they miss bowl season again, it's going to be tough. So I know it doesn't really answer the question for 2023, but the main question mark is their offensive line. They lose so much off of that unit. And then, the defense had a lot of flaws too. So I don't see them contending this year.
Now, this next team, I'm going to phrase it this way to you, Brett. What did Shane Beamer do to you? I'm kidding.
Oh, man. Well, yeah, for sure. Well, Coach Beamer was gracious with his time. I got to interview him. I think he's a great guy. And, I like the importance he's putting on special teams. He's carrying forward the Beamer ball mantra from his dad. And you see that, again, something that coaches talk about. He's actually doing it with his team, and they lead the country in block kicks and punts the last 2 years, 10 of them. That's enough to flip a lot of these one-score games their way. But, when you break down the season, transfer portal was pretty rough on them. Their entire running back room, their tight end rooms, they're all complete changes. And their defensive line, some of their best players are gone off of that unit. So there's a lot of question marks here. I'm surprised that folks are putting them in the top 25, and it's nothing personal. I think that long term, I think that Carolina's on a great trajectory. I just don't think this is the breakthrough season. And it's not even a play on Rattler. I think Rattler's a solid SEC quarterback. You saw the potential there in November and December, and they really lit it up on the scoreboard once they simplified things and maybe took the play calling out of Satterfield's hands. But it's a tough division. I want to throw this in there too. 4 SEC East teams, they all finished in a row last year, my game grader. 40th, 41, 42, 43, and that being Carolina, Florida, Missouri, and Kentucky. So it's razor thin here in this middle tier of the East.
So go ahead.
Can I ask you about, can you tell me a little bit more about that game grader? Because, you mentioned Beamer. We're going to talk about Lee here in a second, Sam Pittman. These are some of these coaches that, may not be where – the program may not be where you want it to be, but you can see that there is success behind them. Can you kind of explain the listeners of the game grader again?
Yeah.
Especially on coaches?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you watch all these games on Saturday. You see scores come across on the ticker. You might see 21-7 or whatever. You don't really know what happened in that game. So I like to go a little bit deeper. I take all the key stats from the game. And then also I like to adjust it for the opponent's strength, because beating Alabama 50-0 is a lot different than beating Vanderbilt 50-0 or beating Akron or Georgia State or whatever. So opponent adjusted, a lot of the key metrics I like to use, and it really gets me a number on these teams. That way I can compare within the division, within the conference, and nationally. So that's the game grader formula. Now, it might be a hidden stat that's missing for South Carolina, because I don't account for any kind of block punts or special teams. So that might be where they sneak up on me. But forecasting forward, I don't see all that repeating year to year. And you bring up a great point with the game grader. I have a page in the book where I do coach carousel grades, and it's not the kind of coach carousel grades that you see online where they're minutes after the guy is hired and they're grading him a B+ or a C. We have no idea how that hire is going to turn out until a couple years. So what I do, I wait 2-3 years. I look back on the performance using my formulas, and not just the raw number, but how he performed to what he inherited. I look at the 4 years before the guy was hired compared to the years that he's been there. So you brought up good names there. Pittman is number 1 in the country from that 2020 carousel. Coach Heupel is number 1 from the 2021 carousel. So these guys inherited some tough programs or tough positions, and they're doing really well with it.
Well, so the last team we've yet to talk about, Vanderbilt, and I heard this just this week, Brett, down there in training camp. Vanderbilt, apparently they hit more than any team in the SEC, so they're getting them ready. And the person told me they have upgraded at every single position on offense aside from running back. So there's there's confidence that Vanderbilt is continuing to progress. They're not a joke anymore. I realize you got them seventh, so do I. So I'm right there with you. But are you at least seeing the improvements to where you can? There's a glimmer of hope that Clark Lee is on the right track here in Nashville.
Oh yeah, he's definitely on the right track, and it's not just me saying it here. I mean, look at their win losses last year. They went in and beat Florida and Kentucky, teams they really struggle with over the years, especially Florida. That's a massive win. That's the proof of concept win that he was looking for. And then you see it off the field too. I mean, they've been for years trying to get that big financial commitment to upgrade the facilities, which are, they're decades behind in all those categories. But he finally got that deal done, and I think that's a testament to him and an alum himself, a guy that loves this program, loves this campus, his community. So you see that reflected there. I mean, I watched some practice clips. You see their end zone is completely under construction. It won't be ready in 10 days for kickoff, but that's just it's that money going to work. It's that proof of concept already being built literally in front of our eyes here. But yeah, roster-wise, I like it too. They're top 40 in returning production on offense. That whole trio is back with Shepard, McGowan, and Skinner. Shepard places on my All-SEC team. I think he's great at receiver. You lose the running back, but the offense pretty much returns intact. It's whether Clark Lee's defense can make some gains. He's a defensive guy himself. I think it gets fixed. But the last note I'll say is, I have them seventh in the East and last in the conference. But out of the, this is, baby steps, right? But they're out of the national top 10, bottom 10, I should say. I mean, almost every year I've done Pick Six previews. You pencil them towards the bottom of Power 5. This year climbing up to 57th out of 69. They're out of that bottom 10, and the trajectory is definitely up.
Yeah, a friend of the show, Chris Lee, not related, said Vanderbilt's capacity will be at 28,500 this year, so pretty low, but at least there's some progress going around, and that's one thing that Vanderbilt's really struggled at doing is letting that money go a little bit. So it's good to see some progress there in Nashville.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask you about Texas and Oklahoma real quick. Not that our audience really cares how they're doing in the Big 12 or anything, but I'm curious to get your thoughts, Brett, on how prepared you think they are for life in the SEC. And I realize we're a year away, but are they going in the right direction? Are you part of this Texas hype train? Is Brett Venables even going to survive to coach in the SEC? What's your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I think that these are the two dominoes that started this big wave of realignment, I think. But at least those made geographical sense. There's somewhat of a border there with the SEC footprint. Texas, I guess you consider, is in it with A&M there. So I think you're adding two of the most historic brands in college football. And, they're considered blue bloods by any metric you look at. They bring in top 10 recruiting classes every year now, both of them. And they have some of the most passionate fan bases in the country, especially Oklahoma. Just watch their spring game, see them online, see them donating. I mean, they're a powerhouse. So I think you're getting two of the strongest brands in the game. Now, on the field this year, so it might look like chalk, but I have them both playing in the conference title game. I have them on their farewell tours meeting in Dallas for the Big 12 title game. When you break it down position by position, I really like Texas this year. Even when you cover up the name, because I'm not really a brands guy, I don't really buy into some of the hype trains that you see. Cover up their name and just look at their roster and their game grader from last year, all their advanced stats. This is a really strong team. So while the rest of the conference loses personnel and coaching changes, I think Texas on their farewell tour wins the thing. So I have them 11th nationally, winning the conference.
Let's roll with that for one more second, man. If these guys were in the SEC this year, and just to make it easy, Texas was in the West, Oklahoma was in the East, where would you have them in your rankings, you think?
Well, yeah, okay. So if you put Texas in the West, I would have them behind Bama. I'd have them behind LSU. I think they'd be in a battle there at that next tier with the A&M, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. I think that'd be a good grouping, but definitely behind Alabama and LSU. So we'll call it third or fourth there, tied with A&M. Oklahoma in the East, I have them obviously behind Georgia, my national title pick. Probably right there with Tennessee. I'd go Tennessee right now, but I'd have Oklahoma third for sure. Then there's a big drop off after that.
Okay.
All right. So are you of the opinion that Texas that week 2 game in Tuscaloosa, that they can make it a fourth quarter ball game, or do you think that home field and Alabama's talent will prevail? And how close of a game do you think that is? I realize that's a little ways out, but can Texas compete in that football game this season?
Well, first off, I think they definitely compete. I think they competed last year, too, against Alabama. I mean, it was a 1-point game, and yardage was pretty much tied. And in that game, Quinn Ewers, he was throwing the ball really well, was injured, knocked out. So I think now that you have a healthy Quinn Ewers, his second year as a full-time starter, all that bonus. Plus, their firepower at receiver and tight end is really impressive. They're my national top 5 unit rankings at receiver and tight end. So they're going to test this Alabama secondary. A lot of new faces, a lot of question marks. I know the talent is there on paper, but this will be a lot of those Alabama players' first time in the national spotlight, first big game, first nationally ranked game. So if there's ever a time to catch them, it's early on like this. So I'm not calling for Texas to win it, but I think they're definitely going to compete.
A couple other teams out of the conference. Last thing for you, Brett. Really appreciate your time. But a couple other teams I wanted to ask you about real quick. Florida State, they obviously opened the season against LSU, and they'll play Florida to end the regular season. How big of a threat is Florida State in your mind to beat LSU in Orlando?
Yeah, I have this as pretty much a toss-up. I think Vegas would reflect that. I think Vegas has LSU by 2 points or so on the neutral site. But Florida State, spoiler alert for the book, they're in my playoff bracket. And the reason behind that, even throw the LSU game away, I think that they're going to go win the ACC this year. A couple reasons why. So last year was really their stats breakthrough. You look at all the stats, they were top 10 or top 20 and everything. They bring it all back. Number 1 in the country in returning production. You see that on offense and defense. Some key decisions, NFL decisions from their defensive linemen. Jordan Travis, a quarterback, a dual-threat Heisman candidate. They're loaded everywhere. But really the difference between them and Clemson, because that's really the head-to-head you have there in the ACC, is that Florida State has embraced and succeeded in the transfer portal. Norvell is signing guys left and right, blue chippers, All-Americans, while Clemson has really ignored the portal. So they are now thin at some key spots. So I have Florida State winning the conference, getting there 11-1 most likely. We'll see about LSU, though. I think that's going to be another classic, just like last year's game. But it's funny to think how far both have come since that moment. LSU went on and won the West and are now a top 5 team. And then Florida State now projected to possibly win the conference. So, a lot of respect for both those programs.
Again, Florida State, I will say this, they've been all, I've seen them, they're all over the map, and Norvell is a guy that keeps popping up. Do you see him at Florida State 3-4 years, or do you think he finds his way to maybe the SEC or the Big Ten or is somewhere else?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, if my prediction clicks here, he makes the playoff. He won't be fired anytime soon, that's for sure. But I think your question is more, if he does that well, is he going to go to a different place? And I don't know how this new the landscape is going to look with the different revenues from the conferences. I mean, could the SEC come in and triple his contract or quadruple it in a couple of years? I don't know, because I know the ACC money-wise is falling way behind. But I don't know. Florida State has enough boosters down there. I think they'll keep him around if they want him.
Now, I know you've always been high on Utah. You got them 14 in the country. They open against Florida out at Utah. What are the odds that Florida can pull the upset there and beat Utah, or how big of a real test will that be for Billy Napier and company?
Yeah, well, I think it's a huge test. I think with Utah, it's one of the more physical teams out west. I know the Pac-12 has a moniker for not being the most physical conference, being more finesse, but Utah is a throwback team. I mean, they're gonna hit. So I think if I answered this a few months ago, I think it would be heavier towards Utah. What's happened recently is a lot of injuries at quarterback for Utah in preseason camp. Cam Rising looks like he's behind on his rehab. He was projected to get back for fall camp.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't happened yet. So that's your starter. And their backup just got injured for the season. So they're on to number 3 right now, a little bit thin at the most important spot on the team. So if there's an angle there for Florida to sneak in the opener, Thursday night opener there in Salt Lake City, it might be at quarterback. So we'll see. I mean, I'll pick Utah straight up. I think it's a great home field advantage. For those SEC fans that haven't watched the game or watched them on TV, you got to tune in and see this Rice-Eccles Stadium. I mean, they're fans that they've sold out every game for like a decade, and It's still old-fashioned where they're jumping up and down, they're shaking the ESPN camera. So it's a cool experience. So tune in for that. It'll be a great way to kick off the season.
How about number 16, Kansas State? I know they're coming off a Big 12 title, but Shane has convinced me Mizzou's going to beat that ass here. Do you think Missouri can beat Kansas State at Missouri?
Yeah, well, you're catching Kansas State early on. It's going to be a whole new look defense. Outside of their linebackers, they're very young and new on the defensive line and in the secondary. So might be Luther Burden going for some big yardage at receiver. We'll see. But, it's at Missouri, which helps. If you look at my preseason rankings, I do have Kansas State in the top 20, well ahead of where I have Missouri. But with home field advantage and catching a young defense, they have a shot. And if you're looking for more on that with Kansas State, what makes them strong is their offensive line. That's all back from last year. And they're really a great player developer where they don't sign top 25 classes, not even top 40 classes usually, but they develop them into NFLers and they won the conference last year. So they're doing a great job over there as a staff.
Now, how about number 21, North Carolina opens the season against South Carolina in Charlotte. What do you anticipate from this matchup? And I realize South Carolina, you got them a little bit lower in the East, but that's more of a factor of the SEC than anything. Is this a toss-up game in your mind?
Yeah, I think it is a toss-up. I'll probably side UNC, but I preface this with, look, I like to celebrate the prediction wins. I've got the number one rating over the last 10, 5, and 3 years, but I also will own up to the misses. And the UNC pick I had a couple years back, I'll never get over that one. I had them winning the conference and going further than that, and it just tanked. So, and I think a lot of that is still there. I don't think they're physical enough as a program. Their offense can get a bunch of yards, but in the red zone, they struggle. They struggle with offensive line push when it matters in crunch time. There's definitely some flaws there. I really like the quarterback, Drake May. He's going to be a Heisman candidate. It's not favorite this year. Last year had a great run as a freshman, so look for a high-flying offense. I think 9 starters back. They're going to put up points, but can they execute in the red zone in crunch time, and can the defense stop anybody? So they have questions of their own, just like I said that South Carolina does. So I'll call it a toss-up. I'll side with UNC slightly right now, just on the offense alone.
Hey, we are the king of bad takes. Trust me. I had A&M winning an SEC championship last year, so you want to talk about way off. Hey, my last question for you, Brett, is I want to ask about Virginia. We'll close with the Tennessee Vols. We're hearing about how bad this team is. I mean, really, how bad are they?
Well, give me Tennessee minus 35 or whatever the line will be. I think that they're going to score at will. Virginia's got their hands full. I have them third worst in all of Power 5, dead last in the ACC, quarterback dead last in the conference. If you look at the ACC rankings I've got there unit-wise, UVA's at the bottom almost everywhere. Defense slightly improved, but yeah, they're going to struggle this year big time.
Music to my ears. Thank you.
Before you go, Brett, can you tell everybody where to find you, where to follow you, and most importantly, where to get their Pick 6 Previews magazine?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. Like I said, one of my favorite preseason stops. You guys are my go-to during the season. I'm tuning in each week. So keep up the great coverage. I keep seeing you guys on TV, so keep that going. And thanks for the praise, too. It's pick6previews.com, Pick6 Previews on Twitter. On the website there, we have some sample teams, some testimonials from the College Game Day guys and others across the country. Yes, we have the hard copy edition still available. It takes about a day or two to ship out. In the meantime, I send over the digital copy immediately. So you're getting both the digital and the hard copy. We do have the standalone digital product if you're just interested in the electronic version too. So we got you covered there, pick6previews.com.
Yeah, and you're not a real college football fan if you don't get the Pick 6 Previews. We would not recommend it if we didn't value it more than any other college football preview magazine. Brett, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it, and rest in peace to your mentions tomorrow.
Hey, no, I'm looking forward to it for sure, and good luck to you guys this season. I'll be tuning in.
All right, so just want to say thanks again, Brett, for joining the show. Always a treat to talk to him. And don't forget to go head on over to prizepicks.com, get you a preview magazine. He buttered you up good, Shane. You must have liked that one.
That's right. I'm going to send some of these to my family now, you know? So, hey, it was awesome having him on. Like, I just love being around smart people, Mike. You know, that's why I'm drawn to you, I think. And when you listen to a guy like that, it's like, man, has he got all this wrote down or somewhere or something? You know, it's just unbelievable. I can't take in 14, 16 teams. You know, he's got them all. So it was awesome having him on. And one of my favorite books, I joke, but it is one of the.
You won't be disappointed.
Give it a shot. I'm telling you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, well, we're never disappointed in you, brother. So
yeah.
I appreciate you for showing up once again. I appreciate all the cousins out there. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right, see you guys. Go Vols. Get out.